weight loss was never the goal. Some of the things that happened were never the goal. The goal was always about triathlon and performance and training and racing.
Welcome back to Fuelin Sessions, the podcast that delves into the science of nutrition, powered by Fuelin, your AI nutrition app that makes nutrition simple, personalized, and adaptive for anyone who exercises and wants to improve their health and their performance. We're going to share expert insights, training tips, strategies, and hopefully a few laughs along the way so you can fuel your best and reach your full potential. I'm Scott Tyndall, and today I am joined by an amazing story, actually, an athlete by the name of Megan Ivers. And it's going to be a good one. Actually, it's going to be a great episode because we don't talk about transformations very much at Fuelin. It's not something that we talk about because stereotypical sort of 8 to 10 weeks, challenge, change your body shape is shrouded in all sorts of issues around disordered eating and eating disorders. And often those individuals sort of, bounce back, 10 or 20% worse or bigger than what they actually started at. But the transformation I'm going to discuss today with Megan is very, very different because it's a transformation of health and performance, as well as obviously some very significant changes in body composition. But without further ado, Megan, welcome to Fuelin Sessions.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, look, I'm going to give a bit of background about good old Megan Ivers because I went to Roth last year and it was amazing. I got to Roth, and so I'm standing in our little stall that we were sharing with Humango, and this lady walks up to me and she goes, "What the hell are you doing to Megan Ivers?" And I was like, "Whoa, what have I done?" And she's like, "It's amazing. You should see her. You should see the things she's doing." And I'm like, Megan Ivers, yeah, that name rings a bell. I think she's a co-pilot athlete. Okay, I better have a look. And I look through the chat and it's like, yeah, we've had a few chats here and there. She sort of, I look at it, your logging, I look at your plan, you do a fair bit of training, you're very good with logging all your meals. And she's like, yeah, she gives me, and just as a context, the woman who spoke to me is Megan's coach. Her name is Amanda Wendorf. Is that how I say Wendorf?
Yep.
And she's like, "You got to chat to her because it's amazing." And I was like, okay, well, let's dive into this a little bit more. So, she said she's lost 50 pounds. She's winning every race or like smashing PRs and everything like that. And she's like, "You got to dive into this." So obviously I looked into it a little bit more, made contact. You've spoken to people like Jordan Blanco. Articles have been written by Jordan, by your bike company, and God knows who else. Everyone's been sort of talking about it. So I thought, let's get Megan on Fuelin Session. So, yeah. What's your response to that?
I'm in it. And I think the reaction that Amanda's had is not unlike the reactions that I've had myself day to day. I mean, it's just amazing, the transformation, as you call it. And weight loss was never the goal. Some of the things that happened were never the goal. The goal was always about triathlon and performance and training and racing and how do you get better as an athlete. And it ended up taking a totally different turn. So again, kudos and gratitude to you, the Fuelin team, Amanda. Everybody needs an Amanda in their corner, somebody that sticks with them through the ups and all the downs too. And that's wonderful to see. And I also want to thank the Glenrock Company and my family and friends. I think everybody kind of thought that this triathlon thing was sort of hitting a limit. And maybe they were happy for that. And then all of a sudden, things kind of turned a corner, and I can't say that I see an endpoint at this stage. I think there's much more to come, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, look, it's quite remarkable actually when I go through, and I think, look, everyone needs a little bit of contact. You are an age group athlete. You're not just an age group athlete, you're an age group athlete who's doing very, very well. But I think let's recap 2025 from the top. So 2025 Ironman Texas, 11 hours 21. You came 11th. 2025 Kona World Championships, 10 hours and 15 minutes. PR by 65 minutes. 5th in your age group. Top American on a brand new bike after totaling your previous ride 2 weeks before. We can talk about that. Bruised ribs, no excuses. In context, 2024, you came 100th. Same age group, 40 to 44-year-old. And then in 2023, you came 215th. That's quite the jump. 2025 Marbella World Championships, you came 10th. Tough course, 5 hours 22. 2025, just straight afterwards, you thought you did Marbella. You thought you'd just jump back in and do another Ironman in Cozumel. Came second. In 2024, you did it in 12 hours 26. That was in 24. And then 25, you did it in 9.5 hours. That's, dropped nearly 3 hours. Fastest age group. Yes, fastest age group bike split. 2025, you ran a sub 25K. Awesome. It's one of those weird things, isn't it? Running under 20 minutes for a 5K. It's like a big tick. It's weird. You swam a lake outside your house because you wanted to, which is 8 miles long, which I was like, wow. And then probably again, I don't want to talk about transformations too much, but you also dropped 50 pounds of weight. And I think it's one of those tricky ones because as I said, we don't talk about transformations a lot in terms of, these big changes, but you dropped 50 pounds of weight and that weight loss was fat tissue. Like pretty extraordinary when you see photos of yourself from the previous year to the current year. And again, it's always a tricky conversation because people are like, well, she didn't need to lose it. And it's like, well, actually, if you look through the data and you actually look at from a health perspective, are you better off now 50 pounds lighter from losing that fat mass? Yes, absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt, certainly in my mind. And obviously I'd be interested from your perspective, from a health perspective, not just even a performance perspective, how you feel being 50 pounds lighter in terms of body fat.
Yeah, I think weight loss was never the goal. And like I said earlier, the goal was always performance, how to feel better in training and racing. I've always loved endurance sport. I've been an athlete for over 2 decades. I grew up playing sports, so it's very familiar to me. And I guess I just didn't realize over time as I got into more long distance training how much fuel I needed and how much my body was lacking that. And I found myself in a pattern that really did not lend itself to being fueled properly for the training. And it got me into a pretty vicious cycle where before I knew it, I wasn't sleeping well, I was eating at night, and all of those things sort of cascaded into a host of issues in terms of getting proper sleep and recovery to not be injured and simply absorbing the training. And I didn't realize how crucial nutrition was. I always thought that I ate pretty decent and fed my body what it needed, but it turns out it just wasn't optimized for the type of training that we're demanding of our bodies as Ironman athletes.
Yeah, and look, I definitely want to dive into that. Before I do, though, I do want to focus a little bit on this body composition change because there's always going to be people who say that's too much. And the really unfortunate thing, and I know we were talking about this off air, is that you didn't have a baseline DEXA. And it's always like I find this all the time in terms of people get the DEXAs done once they've made the significant progress. They never get it done, when they're maybe in a state where they don't want to know. And it's something we see a lot at Fuelin. It's like a lot of encouragement to get that baseline to see where you're progressing to. I think what is nice is you did a 2025 scan and then more recently you've done one in January. And what's really fascinating about that? So let's go back. 2024, you were what? Can I say the body weight? Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah, it was close to 200 pounds, about
200
196. Yep.
Yeah. So 200 pounds, probably an estimated body fat, by your opinion, somewhere between probably around 30% body fat, we would estimate, maybe a little bit higher. Now, in 2025, in May, you got a DEXA done. So it's not bioelectrical impedance. You used a gold standard of body composition measure, and you were 160 pounds and you had a body fat percentage of 18.2%. And what's really, interesting about that is that percentage of body fat is fairly low for a female. Now, some people will hear 18% and go, oh, that's not that low. It is actually very low for a female because of breast tissue and the tissue around the hips naturally for women. So that percentage of body fat obviously puts you more in line with an athlete and certainly in a healthier body composition perspective from a body fat. Your fat mass in 25 was 30 pounds. Your lean mass was 125 pounds. Importantly, your bone mineral density was a T-score of 1.2. And for anyone listening, a T-score of less than -1 is going to be risk of osteopenia. A score of less than -2 is a risk of osteoporosis. With Megan, her bone mineral density is excellent. It's actually 1.2. Importantly, her visceral adipose tissue, or VAT, was down to like 0.5 pound, which is fantastic. And what would have again been amazing, Megan, is to see what was your visceral fat in 2024, because I dare say it probably would have been, 3 or 4 times that amount, probably a few pounds at least. What's amazing now is you've got this other updated test. So it's 6-7 months later. You're a few pounds lighter, 3-4 pounds from when you're in May. So you've maintained really well. Your body fat percentage has actually come down a little bit more. So it's down to around 15%. Most of that was actually incidentally off your arms, which again, you'd say, well, okay, great. Your arms are a little bit more toned now. Your fat mass has actually dropped further, which is in line with the body fat percentage. So you actually dropped an additional 7 pounds of fat, but you actually gained a couple of pounds of lean mass by estimation. So if anything, where you are now is potentially even healthier than what you were 7 months ago, and your bone mineral density dropped by 0.01 on the scale. So in actual fact, your bone mineral density has remained excellent. So there hasn't been a risk to your bones. And your visceral fat actually dropped to pretty much 0. So your visceral fat's dropped to 0. Your bone mineral density is maintained. Your lean mass has gone up. Your fat mass has come down. You're a picture of health.
Yeah, I wouldn't have needed the DEXA to tell me that, although I know it's helpful for conversations like this and to certainly validate, all of the above. But I can feel it in the riding. Through all of that, I never lost any FTP. In fact, I gained strength on the bike, and you see it in the numbers, and I feel it on the bike, in terms of my strength and ability to persevere in different training and racing situations. So it's really exciting to me. And it didn't happen overnight. It was something that was over time. And I think what's exciting too is physiologically, because you don't see changes overnight, 12 months is a relatively short period of time. And so a lot of these nutrition changes I've made have helped me sleep better. And all of that has correlated to the ability to train and race better, to recover better from the training, to actually show up better prepared for the workouts that Amanda puts in play. And I think we're only just starting to see the results for that. So I look back on 25 and it was remarkable. It was a blast. It was so much fun as you were going through all the highlights. I'm just getting chills, thinking of those races and those experiences, which, some cases never imagined that I could have performed in those ways. And to now be here in January of 26, healthy, no injuries, knock on, cross your fingers, just had the DEXA, you're on track, things are healthy. It's thrilling. It's a wonderful place to be. And I think for all of your listeners and for anyone out there who's looking at Fuelin or looking at making a change, I can tell you it's worth it. Stick with it and give it the time that it deserves, and pay attention to the details, because you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. And it's really an incredible experience that I know is waiting for many others out there.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. And I love what you're saying there. It's not overnight. Like, it's like training, isn't it? It's the same
Yeah.
thing. It's like
Yeah.
you don't get great on the bike one time. It's just that continual consistency that really brings it. And I will also note here that Amanda also raised, and I'm sure you've had this guy, and I think we've spoken about this off air as well, is that I think people get concerned. Where are you going to go with this? Is there that temptation to lose more? Is there are you going to stop? And, yes, I think, and I'll let you end. I absolutely think that, yes, at that percentage of body fat, you don't need to drop anymore. You're in a great place. You're healthy, things like that. But from your perspective, is there a desire for you to go, oh, can I lose more? Or can I do that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think, if anything, I was a little bit surprised that things dropped as they did, because as the year got on, look, I think we've all downloaded apps before. It's hard. It's hard to log things consistently, especially from a nutrition standpoint. But I didn't want to get to the end of 2025 and have any shadow of a doubt that there was anything more that I could do. So I made that commitment up front to really do everything I could to meal prep and be consistent and to see where consistency would take me. That being said, I recognize that, there's a price there to pay as well. And that's not something that's sustainable in the long run. And so I've even stepped back and changed how I use the app a little bit, noticing the trends and the themes of the types of recommendations that are made, and perhaps leaning on the quick log a little bit more. And I think one thing that the results most recently the DEXA showed me is that, there's room for flexibility in there, and I need to take advantage of that. And ultimately the app is a guide, right? And I'm in the driver's seat, and I'm the one that has the hunger cues and can control all of that. So I don't want to risk getting injured. I think we found an incredible rhythm at this phase, and I want to maintain that. And I would fear that to take it further would put that opportunity at risk a little bit, and that's not something I'm interested in the least. Like I said, weight loss was never the goal, and I think it is something that I've had to think about a little bit more to make sure that I'm being proactive and doing the things that are ultimately going to keep me healthy long term, and then secondarily help me show up as an athlete.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's interesting again hearing you say, and I think it's something we talked about, like using the app when you need to use the app. You can still use it on a daily basis. You can just view the colors, and that can keep you in line with, you understand what a red snack or a red meal is versus a green snack or a green meal. So you don't necessarily have to weigh that out or do it. And I'm sure you're pretty dialed in, but again, you're in that phase of off season. You're very good. Now, as you approach your first race, you'll probably dial it in a little bit. And that's the beautiful thing about, consistency is you can come in and out of the app and use it as you want, whether you use the quick meal feature or you log using smart meals or whatnot. I think it's really in your hands. As you say, you can control your own destiny, and how, invested in it, I think is really up to you.
And I think that the themes too, if I can build on that, what was most impactful for me was I had mentioned this dynamic where I wasn't fueling enough during the day. So I was waking up at night. And so that kind of got all the I don't know what you would call it, but sort of the ratios of macros throughout the day. So I was not concentrating carbohydrates, for example, around my training. I wasn't eating enough protein during the day. And those two things alone put me in a position where at night, when my body was trying to repair, I was waking up looking for fuel. And when I first started using the app, and I looked at those morning little snack meals before the training sessions, honestly, I was a little bit nervous, because at that time, in my mind, 30 grams of carbs before a session, that's not enough for what I had historically thought that I needed. But then as I realized, well, no, if you actually fuel better during the workout, after the workout, through the rest of the day, don't skip meals, no excuses, you don't need all of that. What's in the plan is actually just right. And so I think that's, I woke up one day and I'm like, well, one more day at 6 a.m. or one more day at 6:30 or one more day at 5:30 wasn't these 2:30, 3 a.m. wake up calls from my stomach saying, feed me, we need more fuel. So it's just that trend alone says to me, hey, set the reminder to yourself, don't skip a meal. If you're having a busy day, prioritize it, find a way to make it happen. You'll perform better and show up better for all of your obligations, for your family, friends, whatever, your work, whatever it is that you're doing. So I think that was something that I didn't realize the cost of, getting hangry and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, no, I think, and just before we go into, I do want to dive into the before versus the current, but I will also say that I think your team around you, I will give kudos to Amanda for caring. Like, she was excited about your transformation in terms of health and performance, but she was also, she was aware that there is potentially a downside to this. And I think the fact that she raised it quickly with me and she raised it with you, I think that's the sign of a great coach.
Absolutely.
That they're willing to have that conversation around it and talk to you about the potential pitfalls. And so, yeah, look, I just want to close that bit off by saying, well done to you, obviously, for making such huge, consistent changes and habitual changes to your life that has resulted in such huge progress from a health and performance perspective related to body composition and obviously all your races. But also hats off to the team that you've put in place and Amanda for, being an ear that you can, talk into, but also her voicing concerns when they need to be raised. So I think that's the sign of a great coach. So let's dive into, why am I doing the work and not getting the return, which is effectively a quote from you that, it was the before. So what, you said you've done endurance sports and sports for years and years. What was going on? Like for you touched on it a little bit then with like hunger pangs in the evening and morning wake ups, but what was going on? Like, give us some examples from some races and things like that.
Yeah. So I'd always wanted to get into Ironman. And so I did my first one in 2017. And then after the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, really wanted to dig into the sport more. And so got a coach, started racing more. And I just could never generate momentum. And it just always left us puzzled. It's like, we'd set the race, get the race registration, great, set out the plan, start working, and training would go okay for a few weeks. And then bam, like some sort of injury, something silly. And then the recovery from those little injuries just didn't happen at the time scale that I needed it to. And then of course, nobody wants to throw a race registration away. So then the effort became more about, well, how do we find a way to get to the finish line? And so to our credit, like we found a way to do that. In many cases, very painful, right? So I went into like one race, Ironman Wisconsin, with a hamstring issue. And, there's some hills on that course. So I'm like, how the heck am I going to get through this? So I ended up running backwards for a lot of that one. And amazingly, some people joined me and ran backwards with me, which was, in solidarity was really good. Felt good to kind of have that. That's the community, right? That's the triathlon community. We're all out to support each other. Ironman Coeur d'Alene, I think this was 23, swam with one arm. So a freak thing, went to go get a blood test and whatever. Somehow my shoulder got tweaked in that process and I couldn't stroke. And, you got the tickets, you got the hotel, you got everything, but a shoulder. And so I kind of patched it up, put some lidocaine on it and said, okay, let's do this thing, and did it with one arm. I think I finished in 90 minutes, which for me was a little bit slower. And then obviously, didn't have a great rest of the day, but kind of got through it. So just failure after failure, I guess it depends on how you define failure, because in many ways I learned a lot, got a lot of mental fortitude from those experiences, but wasn't the return that I was looking to get out of these experiences.
How much training were you doing at the time, volume wise?
Oh, I have no clue. I really, that's where I think for me, I've looked for coaching support because I have so many other obligations that, I like to kind of rely on Amanda really for that. So maybe 10 to 15 hours a week on average, give or take.
Decent amount. Yeah. And so, okay, you fast forward like 20 24 to 25, you obviously decide to make a change midway through 24, I imagine. What was that change?
That I made? The change I made?
Yeah, what was the change you made?
It was actually towards the end of 24. So I had just gotten back from Nice, and we talked a little bit about that. Obviously, for those who know, Ironman Nice World Championships, brutal course, lots of climbing, very intense, a very intense bike course and a very tough course. And it was tough. I was trained well. I did okay, but again, not the result that I wanted. And I just kept questioning. I just couldn't accept the fact that that was the peak of my performance. And so, again, no stone left unturned. We decided, Amanda said, hey, why don't you take a look at Fuelin? I've had some athletes use it. Check it out, see if that does anything different. And so it actually, Cozumel is such an interesting story because it was Cozumel 24 to Cozumel 25 where a lot of these changes happened. And going into Cozumel, I actually had logged into the app a few weeks before, which you're never going to see those outcomes there. So, had the app, used it, obviously, probably nominally helpful as a newer user of it, and then obviously had the race that kind of you'd expect. Got stung by a jellyfish on the swim, got dehydrated, just was not a good day. As again, I guess depending on what you call a good day. For some, that might have been a good day, not what I was trying to get out of it. And so then that precipitated sort of really digging into it and looking at what I previously thought were negotiables as non-negotiables. So in addition to the fueling, took a look at my mindset, started working with a sports psychologist more consistently. Also took a look at strength and mobility.
Can I ask who the sports psychologist is? I'm quite happy if you want to drop their name because
absolutely.
I get asked by a lot of American athletes for a good recommendation for a sports psych, and it's very difficult to find one.
Yeah. Yeah, her name is Emily Kunash with a K, Kunash, and she's with Next Level Counseling in Chicagoland, just outside the city in one of the suburbs. And she's fantastic, has worked with a lot of athletes in the area. And I've worked with her. I actually worked with her before Kona in 2023 as well. And this past year, I made the decision to try to be a little bit more consistent with it, recognizing even just in the midst of this transformation, right? Just in the terms of like wrapping your head around going into these races and going from the hunter to being the hunted, right? And just this mindset around what it means to go out in a race and lead from the front. I'm used to doing that in sprint races many years ago, but I'm not used to doing that in longer distance events. This year has been one of the first years that I've really, taken the lead, in some cases pretty early and really kind of hung out at the front, and that's different. So she's been incredible, and I highly recommend their services and or, any good sports psychologist that you can connect with to really maximize the mindset piece of it as well, because it's quite important.
Yeah, I think it, and thank you. We'll put her link in the show notes, which will be, I think, very useful for a lot of athletes. Did she help you with food at all? Did you ever struggle with food? Was there any discussion around food from a psychological perspective with her?
I don't think, not necessarily. My heritage is part Italian, so I've never had any problems, diving into a good deep dish or what have you. I have a brother who was a football player, so there was, eating was always the center of attention. And yeah, no issues with that whatsoever.
That's great to hear.
I think the sports performance was key, and I think just the kind of the challenges that we all deal with on a daily basis. We're all kind of working through something, and I think it's underestimated how much those somethings can the effect they can have on the overall stress level and how that then correlates to training and racing. I talked a lot with Amanda about the difference in training for kind of stress relief versus performance. So I think I've been making the turn and working really hard on looking at training as something that supports performance versus a stress reliever, which has historically been, I think, one of the ways that I've trended more as a non-coached athlete.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You look at that. It's something I think I tell myself that it's stress relief, but I think actually in my mind it's performance, but probably not quite at your
I
level.
mean,
But
there's still a little stress relief in there, but
there's definitely stress
yeah,
relief with their training. I don't think anyone
yeah.
can argue with that. I think what's really interesting about that, though, then that you didn't have what I love about this story is that you've managed to completely, again, I'll hand inverted commas, transform your body composition without the thought of dieting, without the notion of disordered eating or an eating disorder, yet achieving some phenomenal results simply by being aware and cognizant and purposeful with the way in which you fueled. And so you weren't on a diet. You were just you were fueling for what you were doing.
Right.
And that allowed you to actually achieve in way more than one area. Yes, performance went through the roof, but in doing so, health actually vastly benefited. If we can go into the actual details on that, what did it allow you to get control of? Like, what were the big sort of ticket items where you went, yeah, okay, I was missing that. I had no idea. What did Fuelin show you or sort of unveil or reveal to you? You were like, holy shit, I had no idea.
I'm actually eating more, I think, generally speaking, than I was before. So the quality quality and quantity, I guess. Quality, I usually would say quality over quantity, timing of meals, timing of carbohydrates around the meals, the protein, the importance of the ratios. So getting the fat in there where it's needed, but not excessively. And again, as it relates to timing, that includes not skipping meals. So I tend to have gotten into a pattern where I didn't really recognize the hunger cues maybe during the day, just get absorbed doing everything, other things. And I think we all can relate to that. And then before you know it, you're hangry. And as an athlete, that can be a very dangerous place to be when you're trying to recover and be ready for something the following day. So I think,
especially if you got kids and a partner.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't ever want to get in that hangry state.
I mean, nutrition for athletics and life. I mean, there's so many people that have so many questions, when they see me, if I haven't seen them in a while, I realize that there's some very visible changes about, where I've been to where I am at today. And I think there's a lot of curiosity in that process and how perhaps others can achieve it too, to some degree. That's right for them. And whether they're an athlete or not, I think there's something to learn here. I think one of my first questions when I talk to any of my brothers, if they're having a rough day, it's like, what'd you eat? Are you hydrated? Have some electrolytes? It really does make a difference. And I think that's where the message you kind of pinpointed on earlier, Fuelin has something to offer everybody, whether they're an athlete striving for performance or, a mom or a dad looking for that extra, bump maybe to get around the block or do another run around the bases with the kids.
Yeah. Look, the biggest takeaway I take is that it's not an overnight success. And I hope that, and I imagine that's the real message you give to people when they say, what have you been doing? It's like a lot of hard, bloody work. That's what I've been doing. And it's like, and I think that is important because I think people see maybe your results and they're like, oh, I want to be like Megan. And it's like, yeah, that's a lot of graft. Like it's not an overnight success. There is a lot of, yes, you cook your own meals, on Instagram, you're cooking your own meals. You love doing that. You train hard under Amanda's guidance and you recover, and it takes a lot of dedication.
Yeah.
And so, I think I always say like Fuelin's not a magic potion or anything like that either. It's like, it's a system that allows you to achieve your goals if you use that system correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm doing much of the same things I was doing before Fuelin. Fuelin has been all about optimizing the process and shifting around some of those things. So I'm not eating at 2:30 in the morning, but I'm eating at 2:30 in the afternoon. And that's made a huge difference. And I think like Italian cooking, right? My Italian grandmother, slow cooking, right? To your point, it takes time and it's a commitment and, yeah, it's totally worth it.
But the end result of that slow cooking is like melt in your mouth, like ossobuco
so
or beef cheeks or whatever.
Lasagna,
So,
yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I think that's a great analogy. We'll just call Fuelin is slow cooking, slow nutrition. It's probably not, doesn't resonate that well in the marketing team, though, slow nutrition. So
Yeah.
I love that. What would you say, like, obviously, you've talked about like the transformation, your learnings. You mentioned protein. I think protein's one of those ones that everyone gets a little bit excited about. What did you learn about protein?
Oh, it's important to learn how to cook a steak.
I love that. That's real. That's real.
Yeah,
That is real protein talk. It's not even like grams per kilo or anything. It's like how to cook a steak properly. How did you learn to cook a steak properly, and what was your technique?
I mean, I wouldn't say that I've learned properly.
Do you finish in an oven? Do you finish in the oven?
I do a lot of the slow cooker stuff. So like, throwing it in a slow cooker with some carrots and potatoes, that's probably not kosher. I get the job done.
Not.
I get the nutrients in. I'm still learning. I got a lot to learn.
Have you ever done sous vide steak? Do you know what sous vide is?
I know sous vide. Yeah.
Sous vide. So you do your sous vide steak. You might do it, for several hours or whatever, and then you reverse sear it. So pull it out and then put it on a smoking hot grill. Yeah. And just reverse sear it like, 15 seconds each side just to char it.
Yeah.
Gold.
I suppose I should have started with, it was a change just for me to buy a steak.
There you go.
I'm still learning.
But that's okay.
And that's another good point. I think with all of this is that it doesn't have to be perfect. Like there's many kitchen fails and, we don't have to get into those, but it's, fail forward. I'm buying and eating more meat than I ever have before. And that's, getting more protein than I thought I needed.
What are your other protein go-tos, just out of interest? Like what would be your post-morning meal? Like what would it generally look like from a breakfast perspective? Do you have like a go-to meal?
Well, I love in Fuelin how it's thrown in the suggestion of 2 handfuls of greens. I've taken that to heart and I've basically make everything a salad. So I have my go-to bowl and I know that if I fill that up, that generally that's going to meet the targets for the meal. So usually throw some greens in there, chop it up so more stuff fits in there. 3 or 4 types of veggies, usually some type of onion, something juicy like a grape or a carrot, and then some type of protein. So it could be some type of bean, it could be tofu, it could be eggs, it could be poultry, it could be, don't do fish too often. It's real easy to kind of make the ground beef crumbles and sort of toss that in, and then some type of dressing. So that's kind of become a go-to, and it's like, wow, I never really would have imagined a nice big salad for a big breakfast, but it's wonderful. And once I kind of like, just coming out of Cozumel and recovery mode didn't really, it obviously takes some effort, and I miss those, I miss those meals and couldn't wait to get back to it. So those are kind of just switching up the types of ingredients, but just knowing that if I fill up that salad bowl, that's a good.
And do you then, as a base, I love that as well. And I love hearing athletes say that they're eating so many more veggies. It definitely warms my heart. Do you then, like, based on that, it sounds like a red breakfast or something like that. How do you layer on carbohydrates on top of that? Like, what do you do to add in carbs on top of that base meal?
Yeah, so sweet potatoes, I make my own wheat bread that I put in the freezer, so that's easy to pull out and throw on top. And then just trying to get creative with different types of grains and wild rice. I think wild rice is really hard to get your hands on these days, but when you can find a good source of it, I think that's really great to keep. And, it's, I guess, cooking for one most of the time. It's, sometimes there's that balance of just meal prep and, how do you freeze stuff versus, keep the variety in there. But I think with kind of the rotation of the different grains and carbs, I think that's been, a way to keep it kind of different, but always make sure that I'm getting the carbs in. And then dried fruits, I never
What
like
I was
throwing
going to ask
raisins in
about
there.
fruit. I was going to ask
Yeah.
about fruit. What's your go-to
Yeah.
fruit? Do you eat a lot of fruit
Oh
to
yeah,
help
yeah.
with your
So like
carbs?
apples have been really good in salads. So like chopping up Gala apple in salads or even Honeycrisp, adds a nice sweetness without putting honey or maple syrup per se. You can just throw in an apple and get some really good sweetness. Raisins are also really good. I've made some salads with chopped up dried mango is delicious. Chopped up apricots. So you kind of like
Fresh mango is delicious
fresh
in
mango could be
salads.
good too. Yeah.
Fresh mangoes, we do that a
It's
lot in
hard to
Australia.
find. It's hard to find those
Yeah.
in Chicago in the winter.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I love hearing that. It's great to hear you eating fruit as well. I think weirdly, it's really weird. We talk about vegetables a lot, but we forget to talk about fruit and how wonderful fruit is, and that
Yeah.
it's a great source of carbohydrates. It's a great source of fiber. It's a great source of micronutrients. Let's
Yeah.
make sure everyone is, and we have that actually even within Fuelin now. Like there's generally 2 snacks we'll be recommending have your one of 2 pieces of fruit per day in that recommendation, which I think is great, and it works. As you said, you see the recommendation. People, we used to get I remember when we first started, people would be like, "Why does it say 2/5 of veggies or leafy greens for breakfast?" And I'm like, "Because that's what we want you to do." And they're like, "I've never eaten vegetables for breakfast," and you're like, "You should try it." And then the experience is exactly
Yeah.
what you had. It's like, "Oh my god, I didn't think you could eat vegetables at
Delicious.
breakfast."
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
have it, and you're like, "I feel
Yeah.
better all day. Your energy's sustained."
Yeah.
It's
I
great.
do. I mean, I don't know how far you want to get down the track of meal prep, but that could be a whole nother pod. But I've fallen in love with chopping some of the root veggies in my blender so that it's easier to consume. So like kale, carrots, radishes, red cabbage, any of those sort of heartier vegetables. And you can kind of just, then you got like your nice big bunch of kale that's in your
Yeah, you just shred it.
salad bowl.
You actually just shred it up, and then it becomes a salad. And then I actually did this the other day. It was like, it was red cabbage, white cabbage, carrot, spring onion, everything in the the big Ninja blender, and blended it and did the large chop. And then you've got this salad or this, it's effectively a coleslaw, but you can vary the dressing.
Yeah.
So then I did like a fish sauce, lime zest, lime juice that we used for one. And then you can do the other one, which could be like Greek yogurt with a bit of sriracha and a bit of sweet chili. And then that's more of a coleslaw. Same base, different dressing.
Yep.
And then it's like, you've got 2 completely different meals, even though it's exactly the same base. It's
You're speaking my language, Scott.
it's just the dressing you're changing. And,
Well, and even the dressing, throwing the lemon juice or the lime juice, you're getting extra vitamin C. So you're all like just the dressings alone, throw a little garlic in there, throw a little parsley. With fresh parsley, you're getting additional antioxidants and nutrients that, if you just had the salad with a big old pile of ranch, you wouldn't get that. And actually,
ranch does not exist outside of America. I'll just let you know that. Like that dressing, I remember I had it for the first time. I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" But it's like, it's not the best dressing of choice, especially if you're trying to reduce a few calories here and there. But I love how you also said you put fruit into a salad. A lot of people are like mind blown when you tell them like put blueberries in your salad. It's incredible.
Oh,
they're
it's
like,
so good.
They're like, no way. And then they do it, and they're like, oh my god, that little sweet burst that I just got when I had some carrot and
oranges. You name it. Yeah,
that's great. And it's an easy way again of just topping up the carbohydrate content in that salad. If you need to go from that red to yellow to green, your dressing, you could have a little bit of honey, tablespoon of honey, 15 grams of extra carbs, maple syrup, whatever you want, and then adjust the sweetness with the sour, with the juice of the lemon or the citrus, the lime and whatnot. It's perfect. Anyway, we digress. We're talking.
I'm getting hungry.
We're talking food porn. So, so let's say, okay, all the learnings, you did that. You obviously had the race results, and you had the body composition changes. What were like the big takeaways from you in terms of like, things like, fastest times, FTPs, stuff like that? Like, what did you really see?
Yeah. In terms of the improvements.
Yeah, like what happened with your FTP? You mentioned FTP sort of actually didn't even drop. It actually went up, even though you were
so a lot of
dropping all your
times,
weight.
a lot of times with weight loss, you can actually see a decrease in FTP. And the fact that I was able to maintain my FTP through the year was pretty incredible. And actually, then, as the DEXA showed most recently, an increase in muscle mass, that explains then how I've actually now increased my FTP. So I think that is probably a byproduct of sleeping better and having better, more consistent training on the bike. So we're starting to see improvements in that. My FTP had not improved for the longest time. And I would do test after test, and it's like, oh, it's still the same. Oh, it's still the same. And, in some ways it's kind of frustrating because as an athlete, you always want to see that number increasing. But now it actually is starting to tick up. And that's really, really cool to see. In the swim, in the water, my CSS test, you do a CSS test, which basically takes your 400-yard time and your 200-yard time and splices them together to get a number for training. My 400-yard time dropped from 5:30 to 5:08 within a year, which is pretty incredible from a swimming standpoint, especially when you're already kind of a well-trained athlete. And then my 200-yard time dropped from a 2:35 to a 2:27, which again, obviously at the shorter distances, you're going to see a little bit less of an improvement numbers wise, but that's, whatever, 8 seconds is pretty remarkable across 200 yards over the course of 12 months. And by the way, that CSS test most recently was in the off season when, you're not even kind of at your peak performance. So I guess look at the discipline, and there's been moments like that throughout the year, jumping into training runs and seeing those average mile times drop sub 8, all those little indicators that things are going the way that you'd want them to if you're training for performance, training and fueling for performance, I might add.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'd be, I think anyone would be super stoked with the drops in those sort of splits and the times. I mean, as we said, Cozumel bike, you knocked off an hour. Off your bike time as well.
And I would say that was a little bit conservative. I definitely could have gone harder, and it was, I think the finish time.
You got to go under 5 hours then. For,
it was 5 hours
this year,
49 seconds, and I was watching that clock pretty closely, and there was a part of me that said, if you just go a little bit harder here, you can get that sub 5. But I was thinking about that run and the end goal, which was probably a smart idea.
Did the right thing. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of some of the outcomes, and we touched on this, and I touched on this at the start, it's all well and good to talk about transformations and reductions in body fat and fat mass and things like that. But the real benefit of that comes from health, or comes in the form of health. And yes, obviously performance, it's amazing, but in December 24, you started getting, and it's a real shame you don't have all this, but things like your LDL levels, your HDL, your triglycerides are in fantastic shape. Your doctor, as you said, in 25 didn't even order your cholesterol again, which is a little bit disappointing, but I will encourage you to get those numbers done and keep track of them at least every 12 months, I think, now that you're in a good place. But what was really cool, I think, even just and we were talking about this, I was talking about this with Alan McCubbin on a recent podcast when we're talking about sodium and the daily habitual intake of sodium and the risk for blood pressure for a large majority of people who are salt sensitive in the general population. Your blood pressure actually dropped a whole 10 millimeters of mercury in terms of the systolic. So you dropped from 133 on 79 to 123 on 79. And that is a huge drop. It doesn't sound like a lot, like in terms of that 10 millimeters of mercury, but that's like stuff that medication strives for. And you did it by, I can guarantee you that reduction on the weight has dropped blood pressure because your heart is not having to work as hard. Simple as that from a day-to-day basis, because the mass just isn't there. And that is something that I think you should be incredibly proud of as a number. That's potentially life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And life-saving.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think health is always the goal, right? The athletics piece of it is fun, but I think we owe it to ourselves that we're humans first, right? And
yeah, I mean, imagine what your blood pressure was when you were 200 pounds. Like, I don't know if you have that, but it definitely would have been higher than 133.
I would say over the couple of years where that weight kind of crept up, it kept coming back higher and higher. And I remember thinking to myself every time it would get to, oh, that was just a fluke. Oh, it was just a fluke. But then the next time it would be high or higher, right?
Higher.
And yeah. And so then it was that again, I think was part of the wake up call where these weren't test results that were coming back that were just sort of one-offs. It was consistently going in a direction that we know is not the direction you want that stuff to go.
Yeah, I mean, and it's awareness of trends over time. You can turn your eye to it. You can be blind to it for a while, but once you start seeing those numbers occur time and time again in both directions, going up or coming down, you know that you're either doing the wrong thing or the right thing and heading in that. And, you know, so many people are talking about longevity now, health span or lifespan longevity. It's like, do the simple stuff, people. Like, get your body composition in line with a healthy body composition. Get your training consistent. Get your nutrition consistent and in line with what you're doing. You'll probably add years to your Whoop health score or your you know, whatever the number is, this composite score of what your actual, you know, your biological age is, your biological versus your theoretical age. You know, like, it just comes down to consistency.
Yeah. Building resilience and strength over time. Yeah.
Meg, fantastic to catch up with you. It is remarkable what you've achieved in the last 12 months. I think you said it best by saying you were no longer the hunter, you are the hunted. And people will be very aware of you going into races when you're in their age group. They'll be thinking, can I keep up with Meg? It's a pleasure. It's an honor to have you work with Fuelin and, you know, use the system. You're part of the Fuelin team. And, I'll let you finish up and say whatever it is you want to say, and we'll finish up.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And I think if people walk away from this pod with one thing in mind, it's that you can do this too. The future is bright for you too, and you can also achieve things that you perhaps didn't think were possible. I remember this was a few years ago now. It makes me emotional because I think it's one of those quiet moments that you reflect on as you go through some of these experiences. And I've always, you know, who doesn't look at Kona and want to go to Kona and be there and experience all that island has to offer? And any of these races, any of these finish lines, they're incredible experiences. And there's always that question, can I do it, right? And I had found myself in a place where I'd done a few Ironmans, but didn't know if that was ever possible for me. And I remarked to my brother, one of my brothers, I don't know if I could ever be at the top of my age group because I don't have the body type for it. And just that mindset alone put in place another X number of hurdles to that reality. And he said to me recently, do you remember a couple of years ago when you told me you could never do this because you didn't have the body for it? And yeah, I do remember that. I remember all of it. And I hope that what people take away from this is that, you know, you're probably your own biggest hurdle, and that if you can unleash and really hone in on what is it that you want to achieve, you know, maybe it's a triathlon, maybe it's something else. Don't hold back. There's a lot of potential out there for you, and Fuelin is a great tool to help you get there.
Fantastic, Meg. The quote that I love that you said, and I will finish with this, is I didn't come this far only to come this far.
Yeah.
And so I think 2026, look out.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Megan. Love it. And I think it will be inspirational for a lot of people listening.
Thank you, Scott.